Hi, Long Range Hunting. I'm here with my friend Logan Miller in Boise of Fall River Shooters, and we're going to discuss a few topics here today. Today we're going to be talking about, taking a shot, considerations. Will you do it? Won't you do it? All the factors that go into it from two guys that have been doing this for quite a while. So we'll start off with you, Logan. What's some considerations when you go to take a shot?
Yeah, I'd probably say probably the first one is, with that setup, with that gun, with that scope, with that cartridge, how much practice have I had? And so, there's some guns in my gun cabinet that, I would take, long range shots, and we'll talk about some of those other conditions that we look for and stuff. And then there's other ones that I wouldn't take near as far of a shot because I haven't had the time behind it to practice, the ballistics, et cetera. And so that's why I'd probably say that practice and how well you know the gun, how much you practice with it, would be consideration number one.
I definitely agree with that. We just did a video, and that'll get posted up, of me attempting. I went up to his place. I'd never been there, and that is a consideration too, because when you shoot at a place for a long period of time, you learn it. Versus when you're going into a hunting situation, a lot of times you have never shot there. So it kind of depends. Like if I go down to Badlands, I know the winds. Now they're crazy winds, but I know them because I've shot there so much over the years. Or if I go out to Fouled Boar, it's the same thing. On that range, I know what it's going to do. Winds are going to pick up, but I know where it swirls, where it lays down, all that. But going to your place, that was a completely new environment. And so, I didn't do terrible, but I also, didn't do great that first attempt. I was on the elk, I just was not in that vital circle. So, was it a liver shot if I remember right? About?
Yeah.
It was. So I was a little off the wind, but it's one of those things. And we did that several times during the day, and sometimes I got it, sometimes I didn't. But as I shot there more, I learned more about the wind there, and so that's a big consideration. What kind of winds you have. Is it familiar? Because wind is like water; it does funky things. If you think about how water is going to flow, and so once I got the hang of the wind there, it was pretty easy, and we didn't really miss for the most part. And even when we missed, it was on the target still. It just wasn't exactly where we wanted it. And that's something that comes with advancing on. A lot of people consider a hit anywhere on the target, as a hit, whereas if it's not exactly where we want it, I consider it a miss. And so that's something to, factor in. And, he asked me, he's like, would you take it in this conditions? And one of the biggest factors is ego. And, that kind of set me back because I was kind of, mumbling. I just sitting there thinking to myself, I was like, I want to say yes. I've done, 930 yards, tons of times at different places all over, even in winds crazier than that. But it's one of those things that misses are for the range, not when you're on a game animal. And that's something I think a lot of people have misconceptions on. And again, when we're talking about missing, we're not talking about like, missing by a lot. We're barely missing when we do miss. But it's one of those things that you got to be able to check your ego, and that's kind of one of those things that it's hard because you see an animal, you're like, oh man, I want to get it, but you got to sit there and be like, hey, can I deliver this shot? And so that's kind of one of those things, and training helps with that, but it's just one of those things that, I probably wouldn't have taken that shot at 9:30 on that elk, to be honest. It's one of those things I had to kind of sit there, and I was like, I'd like to say yes, but I don't want to say no. And you got to sit there, and so I ended up trying it. And the ironic part is that was off the bench, but when I got on the tripod, I nailed it first shot later that day, and that was in higher wind. So it's just, you got to factor in a lot of things, and I think that's the biggest problem. And I see that a lot with short range hunters. As I hear all the time about guys saying, oh, well, this guy was out there and he was shooting long range, he was just flinging rounds. Well, that's not a natural long range hunter. That's a short range hunter. There was a guy that did a video, I don't even remember his name, but he talked about it. He says he has two different types of clients. The guys that say they're good at 800 yards, and then they are. And then you got the guy that says he's good at 300 yards, and he's not even good at 2. And the 800-yard guy, the legit guy, he's like, those are the guys that pass up the shots the most. They will get on even a shot that is easy, and they'll be like, you know what, something's not right, I'm not going to take it. And then you got the guys that, aren't really good at 200, and they say they're good at 300, and then they see an animal, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm good. It's 500 yards. I'm good. And I see a lot of that of guys will not practice. They shoot a box maybe a year, and usually it's 2 weeks before season, and then they see an animal, and they don't want to get it away, and so it's either close, and so they think they can't miss, or they just don't want the animal to get away, and they just start popping off shots. And unfortunately, we get blamed for that. It's not actually long-range hunters. It's short-range hunters taking shots beyond their capabilities. And I'm sure you've seen plenty of that. I know I've seen plenty of it.
Yeah, no, and I've seen plenty of it even in my own family growing up,
yeah.
Right? And we didn't grow up long-range hunting or anything, and oftentimes we just pick a little mound of dirt on a dirt mound about 100 yards away and shoot, and if the dirt mound got hit or crumbled, we're like, hey, we're close enough, right? And looking back
minute
now,
of elk.
minute of deer.
Yeah.
My brother, he ran the lever action 30-30, and you go to the store to buy ammo, buy at least 3 boxes. That's kind of some of the mentality that we grew up with. But going back to your story, and that's one thing I think is great for practice and great for everyone for practice is if you can have a target the size of the kill zone, and you put it out there at an effective distance that you want to be able to hunt out to, and you get set up, ask yourself the question, would I ethically take this shot at that animal? And if you decide yes, then you're saying that you're guaranteeing that you're going to hit that kill zone. And like you said, if you hit outside that kill zone, sometimes you get lucky and it would spine it, or it would hit it in the neck or whatever, and it still would kill it. But like you said, it's a miss if you miss where you're aiming, because if that deer, that elk was facing a different direction, you may just wound it and it'll run off and die and not benefit anybody, right? And so I like doing that as a practice is, hey, would I take this? And if it's yes, you're saying 100% I won't miss, and then when you miss, it's an ego check, right? It's like, oh man.
And again, that's for the range. It's funny that it's one of those things as you advance, when we start out, it's, oh, we hit a target. Oh, that's a hit. Or if it's off the target, it's a miss. I have a buddy, Justin. He's a pro shooter, one of the best in the world. And him and a buddy, Clay, they had some guys on the range really confused because they're shooting, little targets. And it was like a 10-inch target at 1,000. And they were arguing on it being a miss because it wasn't dead center. And everybody else is like, we're just happy if we hit the thing. These two are arguing on a matter of inches on which one's closer, and that's kind of where you advance to where it's not, so much, I don't miss targets very often, even on the range. And even when I do, it's very small. And a lot of times I'm shooting very small targets. So even when that target is missed, it still would be a vital hit on an animal. Because I like to really thread the needle on that. Like I was just out in Nevada with buddy Dalton, and we were shooting, bottles about the size of this at 706 yards. And, he put 3 rounds. One went just to the left of it. I mean, here, and then the third one hit. And, some people will be like, oh, well, he missed. He's, that's terrible. But if we had a vital size target, he would have hit all 3 shots, and it would have been, like a 3-4 inch group at that distance. So it's one of those things that, as you advance, you're going to be very, I want to say anal with it, you know what I mean? You really want to push yourself to be super, super accurate. And ego is the biggest thing that I see the guy, you got to have that ego check. And that's probably the biggest problem I see with guys when they're trying to figure out distance is, can you check that ego? A lot of long range hunters are good at that. It's more the short range side that I see the problems. And, it was the same thing with me. Like growing up, I was, it wasn't until later in life that I got training and started actually long range. I mean, here in Idaho growing up, we have long range shots. So everybody's done, 400 or 500 yards is not uncommon when you get into the mountains, and that's doing it with like 3x9 scopes and stuff. But looking at the kills I had back then versus where I am now, I'm just like, man, I sucked. You know what I mean? Yeah. You're looking back and you're like, I was happy. I thought I was a great hunter back then. And then you look back and you're like, man, I sucked so bad. Like, I felt so bad. I should have got more training. I should have been better. Like, it's just weird to look back as you advance and look back. And at the time you're cocky, you're young, and a lot of guys never get out of that, and they don't realize that they're really not as good as they think. So.
Yeah, and I think, equipment's come a long ways.
Definitely.
When I grew up, it was common, you go out hunting, walking out through the sagebrush, and, you got your 12-year-old with I had a 270 scoped, and I'm just trying to hold up and shaky as all get out.
Yeah.
And shot my first deer that way, right? Several shots into it. But nowadays, it's like, hey, you put a kid on a tripod, have them take that tripod out there. It's basically like a transportable fence post.
Yeah.
Right? You put out there and you can make some good ethical shots, help young hunters become more successful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's stuff, even from when I got started in just long range, stuff has come a long way. The ballistic calculators, everything, and both short range and long range. I remember having to shoot a ton of rounds. We'd shoot hundreds of rounds, and we'd go each distance and shoot rounds and tune it in and record it and keep log books, and we had to do all the math, ourselves and all that. And now you can sit there and within, less than a box of ammo, you can sight in, true your gun at distance, and it'll give you your wind adjustment, your elevation for any shot within its capabilities. It'll tell you what your minimum is for your minimum impact velocity. Things have come so far, and it's been a game changer in what people can do. And what it used to take somebody like me years to master, guys are able to do stuff now that it would have taken us years to do back then. And with more available training out there, better instructors, the equipment, it's what used to be to most people unachievable is very easy to achieve these days. But the biggest factor, again, is you and your ego. You got to be able to know when to shoot and when not to.
Agree. I think another one of those, the technology advancements are in scopes as well.
Oh, yeah.
I remember back in the day when Nikon came out with their BDC reticle, no one else, had one in a reasonable price range, and they were flying off the shelves, and it's like, hey, I can get up to 500 or 600 yards now. I've got a BDC in my reticle to work off of rather than a regular crosshair and using Kentucky windage.
Yeah. Well, and stuff like that too, like the Horus, I didn't like Horus Christmas tree style reticles at first, and I avoided getting them, and then I thought it was too busy, and then I actually got one and got to use it, and I was like, man, I like this. And yeah, there's a lot of stuff in there, but I can just as accurately as dialing, I can sit there, hold windage and elevation. And so I don't even, if I have to have a quicker shot, I can get on there. I don't even have to touch the turrets, and I can adjust accurately for both wind and elevation. So yeah, there's been so many advances in it that have helped. But no matter what advancements, what technology, you still have to train. And I love what you said about, your comfort with that particular setup, because that makes a huge difference on how comfortable you are, how well you know. And part of it, it used to be that way just because you had to learn your gun so much and record it. But now, it's also a testament of making sure your ballistic calculator and all your stuff is correct. So if you're saying, okay, well, I've got an 18 mile an hour wind, and you adjust it, it hits dead center, you have that confirmation, not just one or twice and go out there. And something else I want to touch on, because we had this issue, I've got the Smith & Bender on my 6th Creed, and I've had that scope on there, I think 4 years now, and I've never lost zero. I've taken it all over the place, and I don't know why, but for some reason I lost zero. And normally when I go to hunt or do anything, I always go and I'll do a zero check. Well, this time we didn't. We went out for rock chucks, and I missed a 100-yard shot, and I was like, what in the world is going on? It was like, that's the first time I missed anything in years. I don't actually remember the last time I missed 100 yards. I had to have been a teenager back then, back when I really sucked at shooting. And I'm just like, and so we're like, what the heck? And he saw it was hitting high, and I ended up nailing one later. But we went and I checked, and sure enough, I was high and a little bit off on my windage. And so, we ended up re-zeroing that and then going out to distance and truing that new load, and it shot great after that. But I was just like, the one time I did not do that is the time that I'm like, I should have.
And I've designed a challenge that we're going to be doing and coming out with and showing. And the very first part of that challenge is you got to hit a 1-inch circle at 100 yards twice. And I think that's where so many people come out to the range and start lobbing it. Yeah. 5, 6, 700, 1,000 yards, and they're missing, and they're like, oh, my scope's not tracking. This isn't, and they'll waste 20, 30 rounds chasing their tail, and they'll be like, hey, let's check your zero, and their zero's off. And they're just thinking it's their ballistic calculator, it's their scope, whatever it may be. Anyways, and so that's always number one. You get to a new hunting spot, whatever. Find a place, drive a few miles down the road, wherever. Check that zero.
Two things I always do is I'll go. Like I went to Wyoming a couple years ago, and the first thing I did even before hunting was I shot 100 yards, and then I shot at distance. Because when you're dealing with long range, short range, it's not a big a deal. You can just verify 100. But I wanted to verify, one, that my zero was good. Two, that my data was tracking that, even because I had done all that data in Oklahoma. Or at the time, no, it was Florida I was living in, so I did it in Alabama. And no, it was Oklahoma. Because I was in Florida, I went up to Oklahoma, did all the data there, and then went up to Wyoming and verified, and the data was on. So that's something I always do. We were actually just driving out to the range, and he's like, oh, there's a rock chuck, let's go see if we can get one. So we jumped out and did our thing, and I was just like, I can't believe I missed that thing. And that kind of brings me to another point, is knowing your equipment. I had one time, and the guy was like, he'd seen me shoot, we'd done it, I'd hunted with the guy before, and we got on this deer one time, and I think it was 808 yards, which I was more than comfortable with. Only a 6 mile an hour wind, which is light for Oklahoma. It was a steady wind. There was no gusts. I mean, perfect mirage. Everything was perfect. And I could not get this feeling out of my head that I shouldn't take the shot. And so ultimately I went bolt open and, never took the shot. And he's like, I can't believe you. Why would you not take that? I was like, I need to go to the range. And he goes, why? I was like, I want to verify zero. And it was one other time where I didn't verify zero, because, I'd been shooting in another part of Oklahoma and then went to the hunt. So I was like, oh, it should be on, And this is with my 300 Win Mag. And so I go and I get on there, and it's shooting everywhere. And it wasn't actually my zero that was off. The rail came loose, which you never could tell until you actually, went and jiggled it. But I knew my equipment enough that I felt something was wrong. And actually a story of Bobby, one of the instructors at Badlands, the owner, he told me about there was a time him and a student had the same Remington rifle, and the bolts got switched because they pulled them out and cleaning, bolts got switched. And so he went, grabbed the bolt and ran the bolt, and he goes, this ain't my bolt. I mean, he knew instantly because he had that familiarity with it. All the dry firing, the shooting, dry firing's great. And he knew instantly that something was wrong. And that's kind of where you want to get an extension of your body. And, a lot of my guns are that way. Between the time I spend dry firing everything, you get really familiar with it. And so that's kind of one of those things is, listen to that little voice inside your head. If something seems wrong, it's not worth it on an animal. Because, target shooting's one thing. But when you start shooting at a live animal, it's a whole nother. And so it sucks to see something walk away, but it's not worth the risk of wounding something if something doesn't feel right. Sometimes you can't explain it, but that's just, my advice on that.
One other thing too, going off of your story, is like once a year, and it's usually before I go to the range, whether it's, hitting it for the first time in the summer or spring, whatever, is I'll pull my rings off and I'll check that base to make sure that it's torqued. And if it is loose, and a lot of guns, when they come from the factory, they aren't torqued properly. They've got oil on those screws going in there, so they come loose real easy. So I'll pull them off, clean off all the oil, put a little Loctite on there, torque them down. Most of them are 18 to 22 inch pounds. But I'll pull that off, and I'll set my torque driver to 14, 15 inch pounds, and go to loosen it. And if it clicks, because it's like, okay, that's good. Retorque it at 22, 20 or whatever it calls for, just in case. But anyways, I've been on a hunt before too, where I went to set my gun down and I felt just a little jiggle. And I'm like, wait a second, and
that doesn't feel right.
And that base had come loose, and so at that point I was done hunting, and I was there, for the guys I was hunting with. Until
which it's not fun, but it's what you have to do. And I've started going away from like mounted bases with screws. Like the impact action, I love that because it's integrated, so I never have to worry about it going loose. So it's just, looking at the rings, which you can do the rings anytime. You can always put a torque wrench to them anytime. And so I like that a lot better. But I think that pretty well covers this topic. And thanks for tuning in, guys. We're going to have a lot more of these videos. So everybody be safe out there. Happy hunting. Hi, long range hunting. I'm here with my... Take two.
Yeah.
Please try again.
Hi, long range hunting. I'm here with my friend Logan Miller from
Fall River Shooters.
Fall River Shooters. Okay, let's...
Please try again.
Hi, long range hunting. I'm here with my good friend Logan Miller from I'm not doing too good today, am I?
I do the same process.
Yeah, I know.
Doing my intros to my
Just
video.
kind of getting into it, yeah. So this can make the blooper reel.
Yeah.
Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on notification bell so you won't miss out on any future video. And happy hunting.